All right. So the session is a continuation from the one we had in the previous conversation. We introduced to ourselves, ABC costing, that is the activity-based costing. We defined what it is and explained how it is used. Then we made mention in the introduction that mainly in this conversation, we are talking about the process of costing the overheads, right? The overhead costs. And we made mention to us that the traditional method is there where you absorb the overheads based on a specific basis of absorption, and then you allocate them to specific departments or specific product. However, in activity-based costing, we say that here we are not really using a specific basis of apportionment one and generalize it to all the products or all the department. But what we are trying to do, we are allocating these, costs based on the activities that are actually involved in the production process. So we have an example in the same example last time we looked at it. Then we found the total cost using traditional methods. But today we want to do the same, but we use ABC cost. How different will be the costs? And this is what I want you to follow nicely. Okay. So I'm reading question number 1. It's reading, after attending a management accounting course on activity-based costing ABC, you decide to experiment by applying the principles of ABC costing to the 4 products currently made and sold by your company. The details of the 4 products and the relevant information are given below. So these are the details, right, of the products that we are actually producing. So the products that we have is product A, B, C, and D. And we also have specific units that are actually produced. These are units produced for each of these, okay? We are told that the cost per unit for direct labor is 28 kwacha per unit. For material is 40 kwacha per unit, which simply means we wanted to establish the prime cost, which is just the cost made up of direct costs. For product A, you could multiply, for direct material, 40,000 times 120. That would give you the total cost, the total direct material cost. 28 times 120, that would give you the total direct labor cost. Now, we know that total cost is made up of the prime cost, basically the direct cost, plus the indirect cost, the overhead cost, right? So now we need to find a method, of absorbing these overhead costs that we have. And we have a system, we have these overhead costs here. They all have to be absorbed by these particular departments using a basis of apportionment. And in our question, we saw that when you're using the traditional approach, they were using machine hours as a basis of absorption for all these, But what we want to do now is to go further and pick some other details. We are told that the 4 products are actually similar and usually produced in production runs of 20 units. And they sold in the batches of 10. So they are produced in the runs of 20 units and sold also in the batches of 10. Now, there is the information we are given in addition of these overhead costs. There are drivers, right? Now we even have what? Drivers. What are the drivers? This time around, since we are following activity, the activities that are there are, number 1 is setup costs, setting up. And the driver, the cost driver, is the number of the production runs. So we got to know how many production runs are there for each product, okay? The number of production runs for each of the product. And for stores, the cost, the store's cost, this one. Let me just show you this so that you are able to follow nicely. Okay. So I was saying that for the stores, for setup, let me start from the setup is setup cost is 5,250. But we are saying that the driver for this, or the driver that we use in allocating these using ABC costing, is basically the number of production runs. Okay, these are just production runs. So we need to know how many production runs are there for each department and then use them. I'll show you how we use them, don't worry. To divide this cost, the 5,250, then it will go to specific departments, okay, or to it will be allocated to specific products. Then you have inspection and quality control. This cost is 2,100. How do you really assign this to a specific product or a specific service? Then you need to use, there is a driver here. You need to use the number of what? Production runs as well. Yes, very important. The cost drivers. Cost drivers are needed because when you check these are just the indirect costs themselves. When you have these indirect costs, there is a driver, like more like a basis that you're going to use to allocate these, to drive these to specific product or specific service. So you need that. Then afterwards, we also have, let me just zoom out a bit, that you are able to see. The material handling is a cost, right? The total material handling cost overhead is 4,620. Now this one, we are not yet certain how much out of this goes to product A, to B, to C, and D. And we need to know how much goes to product A, B, C, and D. Okay? That's the message we are sending. So, but what basis are we going to use? What's the driver? The driver for that is basically the orders executed. For each product, there are numbers of orders that are executed. So we need to know, okay, how many orders have been placed? The number of orders will help us, to allocate this cost, the material handling, and send it to specific departments. Okay. We are told that the number of requisitions now, since, for example, to assign or to allocate the stores, you need the number of requisitions raised, right? You are told that the number of requisitions raised on the store was what? 20 for each product. So we have known the number of requisitions. It's basically 20 for each product. And then the number of orders executed, they are 42. This is very clear. Remember, when we are dealing with material handling, this cost, we allocate it based on the number of orders executed for each product. And we are told that the number of orders executed, they were actually 42. Now, each order was of a batch of 10 units, okay? 10 units, that's a batch. What is required of us? We are required of calculating the total cost of this now using activity-based cost. First of all, I want to run you through quickly again using the traditional method just to remind you, but the focus is really ABC costing. I showed you last time, this is what we had in the previous class. We said they were allocating using the total number of hours. So they needed to establish really how many total hours are there, and divide them into the total, you know, total what? Total overhead, right? These are total overheads. Total all these overheads. After totaling all the overheads, okay, then divide by the total number of machine hours. And for you to know the total number of machine hours, you're told for product A, it is 4 hours per unit. Which means if you want to know the total number of hours for product A, you would say 4 hours times what? Times 120 units. Because this 4 hour is just for 1 unit. So you'd say 4 hours times 120 units. That would give you specifically the total number of hours for product A. You do the same, 3 hours per unit times 100 for B. That will give you 300. 2 times 80 there for C, and 3 times 120 for D. That will give you the total number of hours for each product. So you have to add all the products, all the hours for each product, right? Consolidate those number of hours and divide them into the total of these. This will give you how much really a machine hour costs now in terms of the overheads. That's what we did. Don't worry, you'll be able to remember nicely. So I am saying that to allocate these overheads, because we are not really worried about the direct costs. The direct costs are already put there. How did they know that the overheads now we should pay a machine hour, we should use maybe 20 kwacha per hour? It was, I told you, total the overheads, then divide by the total number of hours. I explained how to find the total number of hours. For product A, it was 4 hours per unit. Then just multiply times the number of units, It gave us 1,300, the total number of hours that were used to produce the 4 products, and divide them into the total overheads, giving 20 kwacha per machine hour. So it means that all the overheads now shall be allocated based on the machine hours, and it is 20 kwacha per machine hours. So for example, when you go to, these are overheads. When you go to product A, it is 20 kwacha per machine hours. How many hours were allocated to A? It was 4 hours. So you say 4 hours, all right, 4 hours times the 20 kwacha per machine hour. It gives you 80, all right, that's 8. Then the next one, 20 kwacha per machine hours times the 3. That gives you 60. And 20 kwacha times 2 there, it gives you 40. 20 kwacha times 3 gives you another 6. When you add all these now, it will give you the total cost per unit. Total cost per unit, because these are direct material costs plus direct labor plus the overhead. These are total costs per unit. So if you really want to find the total cost that is not unitized, you just multiply, the total cost per unit times the number of units. There are 120 for product A, there are 100 for product B, for C 80, and 120 for D. Then it will give you the total cost for each product. That is the traditional approach. That's what we explained last time. But now we want to use ABC costing. How do you know the total costs for A, for B, for C, and for D using ABC costing? That's the process. Is there any question? We haven't really started looking at it. I was just giving you the background to that. Any questions? Can you hear me clearly? Hello?
Hello, sir.
Yes, are you able to hear me clearly? Are you following?
Yes, I'm following.
Okay. Let's proceed now to the method, ABC costing. So for ABC costing, you have to break down these the overhead costing to the way how they are, there is machine department, there is let me just show you. These labor costs, where are they? These overheads, these, okay? get them and paste them down there, also with their respective drivers. Remember, they have the respective drivers down here. Okay, so we need to calculate the number of production runs. That is the ones that we use, and also the number of requisitions we already have, number of production runs like that, the numbers of orders executed. So get the what is this? The breakdown of the overhead. No, don't add all the overheads now. It's not like in traditional method. Don't add overheads. Instead, just break them. Just have them broken down like this, and you have them with their respective production runs, the cost drivers. So these are the costs and their costs, and also their respective drivers. Drivers are given down. Now listen. You need a cost driver for each of them, all right? But how do we know these drivers? We need to find the transactions for these drivers. For example, let's know for machine department, they said you should use the machine hours. How many hours were there for the total production? You get what I mean? When it comes to the production runs, setup costs, we are using production runs. How many production runs were there? Okay. So now, if you wanted to know, let's start with the production runs. You would do just sum all the units that were produced for A, for B, for C, and for D, and divide by what? By the number of runs that are given. So total units by total units, because we want to divide those units, allocate those runs to specific units. So add the units and then divide by the number of runs that are there in general. And then you have the number of setups that are available. So for example, this one setup cost is based on the production runs. How do you find the production runs per setup? We have to add all the units, divide by the number of the production runs. There are 20. So divide by the 20 production runs, and then you have the number of setups. Okay. How do we know the number of setups? So I've already said, I'm saying that add all the units, these units, add these units. Then when you total up all these units, we want to produce the production runs. Divide by, remember the production runs, they are of 20 runs per unit. You get what I mean? Production runs of 20 units, like there are 20 units for each production run. So if you want specific production runs, total up all these units, right? When you add 120 plus 100 plus 80 plus 120, you get the total you are finding, divide by 20. Okay, so that will give you the setups that are really available. That should be there. So basically, that's how you allocate this for the number of setup. So see, this is what we mean. So could you you would add all these, and then there are 424. They give you 420 divided by the number of runs. There are 20, getting 21 setups. So this is how you get the setups. There are 21. Then for the number of requisitions, we are told that there are 20 requisitions for each product. That's what the question said. 20 requisitions for each product. So you just multiply 20 requisitions times the number of products. There are 80 requisitions altogether. The number of products are 4. So 4 times the 20, giving you 80 requisitions. The number of orders executed, you're told that these are sold in terms of the batches of 10. So you divide the total number of units divided by 10 units per batch. That will produce, 42 orders. So the number of orders is 42 as gotten. That's how you find it. Okay. So we have found the costs, basically the cost for these transactions. What do you need next? You need to find now a cost per unit. Get what I mean, eh? Get the cost per unit. Since we want to allocate these costs to specific products, now there are different numbers of units for each product. So let's find the cost per unit. How do you find the cost per unit? How do you find the cost per unit? Right? How do we find the cost per unit? So to find the cost per unit, basically, you are dividing this specific overhead, the overhead divided by the cost driver transactions, right? The cost driver transactions, the number of these transactions. So for example, on material versus machine department, the overhead is 10,430. Divide that by 1,300, right? 10,430 divided by 1,300. That will give you the specific unit now, specific cost per unit in this department or for machine department. We go on to the setup. Another activity is setup. So setting up, we need setup costs. The total overheads for all the products is 5,250. But we want to allocate this to specific units. So we need to know the cost per unit of this. So we just divide this by, the setup divided by the number of what? The number of transactions. They are 21. So the production runs are 21. So 21 production runs into that gives you 250. And that 250 that you are finding basically is a cost per unit for setting up. Okay? Then we go to stores receiving. The stores receiving, the total cost is overhead cost is 3,600. And it is based on the driver is requisition raised. There are 80 requisitions that are raised altogether. So to find a cost per unit, you just say 3,600 divided by these 80 what? By the 80, 80 requisitions made, right? So you would actually find that. Okay. So when you divide 80 units into this, you'll find 45. Again, when you come to equality, you are just dividing basically the number of production runs that are here, because inspection quality, the driver is the production run. So the driver is very important when it comes to ABC cost. You need the driver itself, the cost driver. Driver into that giving us 100. And finally, for material handling, the total overhead cost divided by the number of orders executed, giving us 110 for each unit. And once you are done with this, the question is almost done. Okay? We are almost done. Cost per unit. So in short, always establish the cost per unit. How do you establish the cost per unit? Can you know the driver? Are you using the production runs? How do you calculate for production runs? I've already explained. How are you using the requisitions raised? How do you calculate for them? Are you using the number of orders? The question will be very clear. How do you calculate for them? Once you find them, can you divide now those runs into the specific overheads so that you can find a cost per unit? Okay. Are we good on how to find cost per unit? We are observing the overheads. Now, are we good? Do we have any question? Can you see the screen? Can you hear me clearly? Any clarity to be sought? Are you seeking some clarity? Okay. Let's proceed then. How do you now find out the total cost? Remember, I've already told you total cost is made up of direct costs. The direct costs that we don't have pressure with them, we already have them. Direct cost per unit, we have them. Direct costs for material, direct costs for what? For labor, those are there. But the issue is with the overheads. So how do you deal with it? the overheads. That's the first thing. So number one now, for each product, the first cost that we want to do is the machine what? Machine cost. How do you actually find machine cost? Remember, the machine cost is based on the number of hours. So we need to do the how many hours are there for each department or for each product, machine hours. And those machine hours that we have are for per unit. So we need to multiply those number of hours times the number of the units, then you multiply by this cost. You didn't get this one. Let me repeat. We are given, for example, product A. Let's pick product A. How many number of hours are there, machine hours are there for product A? We are given 4 hours per machine, right? 4 hours. So per unit, sorry. 4 machine hours per unit. So you say 4 times the number of units. There are how many? 20. So this will give you the total number of hours, machine hours in product A. Then when you find those total number of hours, then you ask yourself, how much is each hour? Each hour is now 80.02. That's the cost of each hour. When you come to B as well, you say 3 times the number of units. It will give you 300 hours, machine hours to produce B. Then for this 2 hours times 80 units, 160 hours for C. And just like that, you go on to D. So this will give you the specific number of hours, total number of hours for each product. Now, those total number of hours, multiply them by the cost per unit. And the cost per unit is 80.02. That's what we have established. 80.02. Right? For machine setup. How did we find this? I'm just from explaining. It's 3 hours, total number of hours for the entire production process into the total overhead allocated to machine department. It gives you that 8. Now, this one per unit, multiply by the number of units, you know, cost per unit is just that. Okay. I think we are fine with that. We should be fine. Then when we come to what is this? The other costs. Which one is the other overhead? The setup. Setup is based on the production what? Runs. Now listen. The production runs are into the batches of 20 units, you know, per run. So the units that are there for A, we are given that they are how many? 120 for product A. So 120 divided by 20 units. That will give us the number of runs for A. Then times the cost per run, like the unit, which is 250. So say 20 into 120. That should give us 6, yeah? So you say then 6 times what? Times 250. That will give you the cost that goes to A. All right? The setup cost, the total setup cost to A. Okay? When you go to B, the number of units are 100 divided by 20, you know, 20 production runs. That will give you 5 times now this is 250 per unit. That will give you the cost as well. So this is the message that we are sending. Okay? You do the same when you go to C. How many units in total? There are 80. 80 divided by 20, giving us 4. 4 times the same 2,500, you know that. So basically, that's how that is done. Okay? That is how locating setup costs. Right? So if you go back, this is exactly what I was trying to talk about. I'm talking about the setup. I've not really talked about the prime costs are easy. I'll talk about the prime costs a bit later. Basically the direct costs themselves. Just add all the direct costs that are given in the question. Direct labor plus direct material. Then their total you find multiplied by the number of units. it gives you this. It gives you this. Setup. I was explaining about setups. I said, so for product A, for example, there are 6 setups. How did we find them? The number of units for product A is 120 divided by the 20 runs. Since the setups are allocated based on the production runs. So 120 divided by 20 runs times, this is 6 times 250. That gives you 1.5. All right, that's how you find the 1.5. Then the next one is 100. That is product B. Divided by 20, that gives you 5 times 250, giving us 1,250 basically, like that. Okay. So then the other one is 80 units divided by 24, 4 times 250, giving you 1,000. And you proceed like this. So that's how you find these setup costs, right? That's how the setup costs are found. You will find them based on the production runs. Then when you go to the stores receiving, we want to know the driver first. What is this driver for the stores? Let's check the driver for the stores. The stores is driven by what? By requisitions, the number of requisitions. Now you were told that the requisitions are how many per product? They're just 20, right? It's 20 per product. So you multiply that 20 per product, 20 times this 45, all right? So you say 20 times 45. 20, because each product is 20, so it's just 20 times 45, 20 times this 45 per requisition. It will give you these stores. You've seen it's fixed amount, right? Because the number of requisitions are just the fixed, they are 20, and the cost per one is 45. So you can easily do that. Okay. Let's go to inspection. How do we allocate the inspection? Inspection quality, the costs. When we get to inspection quality, for example, the quality of inspection, what is the driver? That's another question. You start asking. The driver is production runs, isn't it? Now, how do you find the runs? We already said that for the production runs in this question, they were in the runs of 2020. That's what we said exactly here. It's the same stuff. So the production runs are in the batches of 20 per unit. So you divide, for example, in product A, you have 120 units divided by 20 runs. That gives you 6. Then 6 times what? Times this 100. It will give you 600, right? That will be 600. Product B has 100 units divided by 20, that is 5. 5 times 100, it gives you what? 500, just like that. You go on to the next product. Next product has 80 units, that's product C. Divided by 20, that gives you what? 4 times 100, that gives you 400. That's how you find the inspection quality costs using the activity-based. This is how this one was found, the inspection quality. This is the one that I'm trying to explain. So it's just basically the number of units. These were how many? 120. These are 180. The last one were 120 as well. Eh? So you do divide by the number of runs. For example, first one, 120 divided by 20, okay, times the cost that was there, which was 100, and that gave us 600. The following one, 100 divided by 25 times 100, 500. That's how we found this cost again. Let's go to handling dispatch. We can go to handling costs. Handling costs. Again, before we go to handling costs, we ask ourselves, what is the driver for the handling dispatch? The handling dispatch is based on the number of what? Orders executed. Now, When it comes to the number of orders, we know the total orders in the production process, there are 42, but we don't know for each product. So to find for each product, we are told that these orders are done in the what? In the batches of 10 units, like 10 units per batch. So you just do the same. You say for product A, for example, this is 110. The driver is 110. So you say for product A, look at product A, for example. Handling cost, 120 divided by 10 units, all right? And then when you do that, you multiply by 110 because the cost per unit is 110, that's what we calculate. Then you come to product B, which is 100 units divided by 10 times 110, like that. Product C is 80 units divided by 10, times 110, basically. And D is 120 times divided by 10 times 110. So that gives you this line for material handling. This is how you find this. The one for handling dispatches. Machine cost is the first one that I started with explaining actually. I said it's based on the number of hours. That's a driver. So number of hours for product A, it was 4 hours, for example. Then you say 4 hours multiplied by the number of units. Because these are 4 hours per unit. So 4 hours per unit times 120 units multiplied by 8. Yeah, so that's how it is done. That's how you go to B, and then you go on to another product. So get the number of hours times the units, then times the cost per unit. This is what I was saying. Let me just get back in a little bit that you may see. I was talking about this number of hours. So for product A, 4 hours times 120, give you the total number of machine hours for A times 8 kwacha per unit. The 8 kwacha, 802. And also 300, 3 times 100, that's 300 times 802. That's how you find those material costs. All right? Right. This is how these are found. The material, the machine department cost is for the machines. This is how they were all found. And then maybe let me remind you again one more time before we have to find the total cost. How were the prime costs found? I said the prime costs are basically, get back, the prime costs are, they are all direct costs added together. So in short, you just add all these prime costs, direct material plus direct labor. For A, for example, you say 40 plus 28, that's 68 per unit, times the number of units, they are 120. That is how much you find that amount, the 8,160 somewhere. That's a prime cost, because prime cost simply means direct material plus direct labor. Then when you come to B, add 50 plus 21. Then the total you find multiplied by 100 units. All right. And also when you get to C, just add the direct costs only multiplied by the number of units. That's how you find all the prime costs. Now that the prime costs are found, all prime costs have been found, what do you do next? You just add. You have found the prime costs. This is how the prime costs were found. I've explained. These are they. Then you add everything now. So in short, if you have followed nicely under ABC costing, the overheads are not just grouped together like in traditional method. No, here the overheads are broken down. Then we allocate them to each product. Okay, so first of all, overheads are broken down according to activities, different activities. Then those activities are assigned to specific cost per unit, and then we allocate them to specific products. That's what we have done. All these are overheads. These have been broken down. And then just add direct prime costs or direct costs plus the overheads. These are the total costs. If you use the ABC cost, these are total costs. What is the difference? Maybe. What's the difference? This one is 16,331 for A using ABC, but using traditional, it is 17,706. It's even higher cost. For B, using traditional is 13,100. Let's check using when you're using ABC cost. Right? If you use the ABC costing, that will be 13,257. You will see the reduction in the values, in some values in terms of the cost. So basically, this is the conversation.